The courtroom was alive with tension that morning. Whispers bounced around the gallery as people leaned toward one another, eager to share their predictions. Reporters scribbled in their notepads, convinced that today's hearing would be over before it even began. On trial was a young man named Marcus Johnson, 28 years old, a man the world was already labeling guilty. He stood accused of financial crime so serious, the newspapers were calling it a slam-dunk conviction. But it wasn't the charges that had the town buzzing. It was the way Marcus had chosen to fight them. Just a week earlier, he shocked the court by firing his lawyer. He stood before the judge and declared, with calm certainty, that he would represent himself. The judge had frowned, leaning forward over the bench. "Son, you're playing with fire. You're facing decades in prison. You need legal counsel." But Marcus didn't waver. His voice was steady, unshaken. "With all due respect, Your Honor, no one can defend my truth better than I can." The prosecutor had smirked that day, a smug grin tugging at his lips. To him, Marcus had just handed him the easiest victory of his career. Now, as Marcus walked into the courtroom alone, no lawyer, no team, no one to guide him, the whispers grew louder. The gallery shook their heads, convinced this man was walking into a storm without an umbrella. But what none of them knew was that Marcus had been preparing. Night after night, he pored over the case files, the evidence, the transcripts. He knew every detail inside and out. And when the trial began, he was ready. The prosecution went first. Their opening statement was sharp, polished, dripping with confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the prosecutor said, pacing slowly before them, "this case is simple. The defendant stole money. He lied. He covered his tracks. And we will prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Marcus Johnson is guilty." The jury nodded, taking notes. Even the gallery seemed convinced. Marcus sat quietly, his hands folded, eyes locked on the prosecutor. He didn't flinch. He didn't frown. He waited. When the prosecutor finished, Marcus rose to his feet. He didn't have a suit that screamed wealth or power. He didn't have the booming voice of a seasoned lawyer. But he had something else. He had the truth. He walked slowly to the center of the courtroom. The room grew quiet, the air heavy with expectation. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Marcus began, his voice calm but firm, "I am not a lawyer. I don't pretend to be. But I am a man whose life is on the line. And the story you just heard is not the truth." He paused, letting the silence stretch, making sure every eye was on him. "For the next few days, you will hear evidence. You will hear testimony. And you will hear lies. My job is not to trick you or confuse you or hide behind complicated words. My job is simple, to show you the truth." The gallery leaned forward. Even the judge looked intrigued. When the first witness took the stand, Marcus approached slowly. He didn't shout, didn't rush. "Sir," Marcus asked, "you testified that you saw me sign the documents in question. Is that correct?" "Yes," the witness replied, confident. "And you signed your own statement under oath that this happened on the 12th of March. "Yes, that's correct." Marcus walked to the evidence table, picked up a document, and held it up. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the very contract the witness claims I signed on the 12th. He walked closer to the jury, pointing at the date printed in bold at the bottom. "But if you look right here, you'll see it was created on the 15th, 3 days after he claims to have seen me sign it." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. The witness shifted uncomfortably. The prosecutor jumped to his feet. "Objection!" But the judge leaned forward, peering at the document himself. "Overruled. The jury will note the discrepancy." The first crack in the prosecution's case had appeared, and it was Marcus who struck it. Day after day, Marcus chipped away at the story the prosecution tried to build. When another witness testified, Marcus calmly revealed inconsistencies in their timeline. When the prosecution introduced financial records, Marcus highlighted small details they had ignored, details that told an entirely different story. He didn't argue with arrogance. He didn't attack with anger. He simply pointed out the truth, piece by piece, until the case against him began to collapse. At one point, he picked up a single piece of paper from the stack of evidence and held it high. "This paper," he said, turning slowly to face the jury, is the heart of their case, but they're only showing you what they want you to see. Look closer. It doesn't just tell their story. It tells mine. The jury leaned forward. Even the judge, who had seen thousands of cases, seemed captivated. The prosecutor's smirk was long gone. He shuffled his papers nervously, realizing the man he underestimated was dismantling his case brick by brick. When it came time for closing arguments, Marcus stood once more, his voice steady, his eyes locked on the jury. I may not have a law degree. I may not speak like the men and women you usually see in this courtroom, but I know my life. I know my truth, and I know that truth doesn't need a lawyer to stand tall. He paused, letting his words settle. They wanted you to believe I was a criminal, but the evidence proves otherwise. They wanted you to see a guilty man, but all I ask is that you see me for who I really am. He stepped back, leaving the jury in silence. The jury deliberated for hours. The gallery sat in hushed anticipation, hearts pounding with every passing minute. Marcus sat alone, calm, hands folded. Finally, the jury returned. The foreman rose, unfolding the piece of paper that held Marcus's fate. We, the jury, find defendant not guilty. Gasps filled the courtroom. The gallery erupted before the judge slammed his gavel for silence. The prosecutor sat in stunned disbelief. The judge himself looked at Marcus. His expression almost won respect. And Marcus, he simply closed his eyes and let out the breath he had been holding for months. He walked out of that courtroom a free man. Not because he had money, not because he had connections, but because he had the courage to stand up, speak the truth, and refuse to be underestimated. One juror was overheard whispering to another as they left. That man didn't just defend his case. He defended his dignity. And with that, Marcus Johnson became a living reminder of one powerful truth. Never underestimate the quietest man in the room, because sometimes the one you expect to lose is the one destined to win.